When you're fed up with fighting food and your body, join us here. I'm Allie Shapiro, creator of the Truce with Food program and your host for Insatiable, where we explore the hidden aspects of fighting our food, our weight, and our bodies, and dive deep into nutrition science and true whole health. Fair warning, this is not your parents' health care. This is a big rebel yell to those who crave meaning, hunger for truth, and whose lust for life is truly insatiable. Believe me, freedom awaits. Hello, insatiable listeners. Welcome to Season 4, Episode 7, Why Am I Eating This Now? So one of the questions that I get wherever I go or whenever I survey my list is to say, why do I get stuck in this on and off eating cycle? Or why is food really worth it in the moment, but not afterwards? And so I created my program, Why Am I Eating This Now?, to answer those questions. And I wanted to bring two of my clients on who had taken the program last fall and are still having success today, 9 months later, so that you could hear from them in their words what really works. Because oftentimes, and most times, it's not about the food. And we hear that, but we often don't have a clear and exact process for figuring out how to not make it worth it in the moment. And so my clients, Lourdes and Tina, generously shared of their story and their time and their insights on today's episode. And let me tell you, they brought it. So I'm really excited for you to get a completely different perspective on hashtag food freedom and a really liberating and life-changing way out. So enjoy today's episode. And if you are interested in the program, we have the live version starting in September. So check out allieshapiro.com to get more information. Enjoy today's show. So some of the top questions that I get is how to stop this on and off eating cycle. And in other words, why am I eating this now? Why am I doing this? And what we're really saying is, why am I eating out of alignment with my goals and my values? And I'm really excited to talk about this because I think I have a little bit of a different perspective than you often hear. And we have Tina and Lourdes who took the Why Am I Eating This Now course last year, and they're going to be able to share their own experience, like pre-going into the course and then afterwards, and what they learned to help us out here. So thanks for being here, lovely ladies.
Thank you.
Yeah, we always get the most feedback when we have like people sharing their stories. So I really am thankful for your time. So the first question I get often, like I said, is how do I break this on-off cycle? And what I often think is people start to think that why they're eating in the moment is directly related to the food or directly related to that moment. And what I want us to do, listeners, is start to kind of reframe the metaphor as this linear process that implies everything is like direct cause and effect. And think of yourselves more like a plant. I don't know if that's helpful for you, Tina and Lourdes, and I'd love to hear your perspective on how you reframed it. But really thinking about what is the soil where I need healthy behaviors, what we often call healthy habits, to grow. So I always use the example when I was really struggling with eating, peanut M&Ms were my thing. And, you know, when I was on track, what I would think of as in my head on track, even though there isn't a track, it's more of an ecosystem. I would think like, oh my God, they have high fructose corn syrup in them and blue dye number 5 and red dye number 4. And such a big serving size. It was kind of like smug. But then when I was, quote, off track, I just didn't care. And I remember, Tina, I know you travel a ton. I remember always, like, when I would be on Amtrak or in an airport, that's when it would, like, get me. And be like, I'm tired. I deserve this. It's been a long day. And what I want you listeners to understand is the peanut M&Ms did not change. I changed. Something about me changed. And it actually wasn't my willpower or discipline. And there was something within me that I had to start to identify to change. And, you know, in the West, we talk about cultural narratives on this podcast a lot. We have this meritocracy myth that everything is based on merit. It's an individual effort. You're rewarded for your individual effort. And that trickles down into health as we think it's about us, self-sabotaging or going against our goals is about us as a person rather than the system that we're in, including our mental system that we've created. So just kind of planting some seeds to extend the metaphor even further. But I would just love to hear from you. We'll start with Tina. What did you go in thinking, like why am I eating this now? And what clarity and insights did you have coming out about the root cause of, you not eating in alignment with your goals?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I absolutely love that metaphor of seasons and plants. And I think I'll start where I am currently and then kind of back it up. So along with this same metaphor, what I've been using a lot, and I got this actually I believe I got it from the Happier podcast with Gretchen Rubin and her sister Liz. And they talk about seasons of sacrifice in our life or in our work. And that whole idea of a season and knowing that there are times in our lives that are going to be really stressful, really chaotic. For me, it's around work. So right now I'm currently in my season of sacrifice. So the summer is when I'm traveling the most, conducting a lot of workshops. And when I think of it in terms of a season of sacrifice, it just changes my mindset somewhat and allows me to have a tiny bit of calm that I never had before, where prior to this shift in thinking into doing this work, it was just like white knuckling my way through it. And we all know, the more I do that, the more, I just resist and eat out of alignment with my goals and it kind of turns into a poor me and it just goes down this bad cycle. So when I kind of did that shift, and so knowing when my seasons of sacrifice are, my seasons of rest, I can really do some like pre-planning, prepare mentally, get myself ready, and know I just kind of go into it with a different mindset. And then it's not the white knuckling piece of it. That's been a huge, huge shift where it is a really hard time, but people are like, oh my God, you're traveling so much. Are you doing okay? And I'm like, I'm okay. Cause you know what? I know in like a week, I'm going to have my season of rest and I'm going to take full advantage of that. And what I need to get through a season of sacrifice is to be my very best self. And I have learned what that means for my eating, my exercise, my sleep, all of it kind of coming together to be able to get through that. So it's been a huge shift, mind shift more than anything else.
So did you have to change was your trigger around tiredness and exhaustion, or what was it?
Yes.
What were the conditions that brought up it wasn't the food, it was the depression, right? Or what was it?
Yeah, I could list them off because I was really thinking through this. So it's absolutely depletion and tiredness. Travel just takes it out of me. But then there's also, this was another aha through the program of, I truly identify myself as an introvert, but in my job, I'm an extrovert and I love it. So I'm that weird combination. So I do these workshops for educators, anything from like 20 people to 750 people. And they're all day workshops and I absolutely love them. I am fully present. I love them. I have a high from them, energized. But when I am done, I am done. And when I could pinpoint, that is my biggest trigger point. And what we talked about in that program was that buy one, get one thing that you talk about of, it's that I totally overwhelmed, let down. There's a sense of loneliness there, which is also odd to go from this high. And then I have no one, if I don't set it up at the end of a training, I have no one to even talk about it with. Like I leave there, I go to the airport, and I just kind of done. So there's depletion. And so I really had to work through that eating in the moment and discovering what I was doing in that moment was, there's a natural blood sugar low anyway there, but knowing that it's the 100%, it's the letdown. I'm certain that on those 8-9 hours, it is pure adrenaline and then that adrenaline crash. So just figuring all that out and providing myself some kindness and understanding around that and some different ways to deal with my drive to the airport and then how I handle the airport itself, knowing that I really need a sense of calm. I need someone that I can touch base with and talk with, and just kind of changing routines around that so that I don't go headfirst into French fries.
I love that because I think a lot of times this work is surprising because it's like, oh my God, I'm lonely after being out
Yes,
with people. But it's
yes,
almost like you need a bookend, right? Like, and that's
yes,
often why we eat at the end of the night. It's like a bookend to, okay, this is completed. It's a ritual out of the transition, and transitions are tough. And I love that you notice, like, I need to actually connect with someone
yes,
to kind of bookend for that. And I can do that for myself rather than putting more rules around food when you're already
yes.
depleted. So,
And it was a surprise because, like I said, I consider myself an introvert, and I thought I was fighting my white knuckling was like getting through the end of a training and thinking that I just needed time by myself, which I do. But in actuality, it's I also need to connect with one person, that like deep connection, whoever it is. It's usually a girlfriend or my husband, someone that I talk with, just to kind of go through the day and then done. So there was like a step that I was missing in between that has been a huge aha for me.
oh, I love that. I love that. Yeah, a lot of I think sometimes I love the categories of knowing these patterns about ourselves, like introvert, extrovert. But I think sometimes they put us in these like binary thinking where we're
Yeah.
like, a lot of my introvert clients are like, wow, I actually really like group exercise, even though I'm like kind of alone by myself. And they're like, I'm shocked by that. So I love that you shared that. Thank you. Well,
Yeah.
Lourdes, what about you?
I basically found that it was a domino effect with me. Everything would stack up, and over time, funnily enough, I've actually become a bit more resilient. You learn things, you read enough friggin' self-help books. You keep the ones you like, you pass the ones on that are okay.
To the people you don't like. No, I'm just kidding. No, they need the books you really do like, right? To the rest.
Yeah, those who donate. So I essentially discovered that there were things that my therapist couldn't help me with. I was like, all right, we've tackled all of this past history. I find that I get to a point with stress that it controls me and it starts triggering things. And that is when I need help. And they basically said, well, there's nothing real, that's not really my area of specialty. And I'm like, okay, great. So what do I do? And someone had recommended you, and I basically just kind of watched you develop in your program. And I got to a point where I just couldn't figure out what all of those bits and pieces were. So we had our first big intro consult. I told my husband, I'm like, if I haven't figured this out by July, I need to call this woman Allie and like have a consult with her. It took me 3 months to finally put everything together. And we basically kind of like tease the things apart. My stories are very long and complicated and drawn out, but I have a start point and an end point with the work that we've done. So because I can now speak to my stories and I can detach from them, I can cope better. So I am now at the point where I'm actually on the tail end of 6 months of complete, you would not believe the stories I have. And I've just basically, instead of kind of being in the story and reacting to the story, I now live through the story. And I find humor in the story so that I'm not constantly anxious. Oh, what next? Now I'm like, what next? Bring it. I can handle it. Like, I really can handle it. And actually, I had a trigger earlier today, some trauma from like 17 years ago that just we're a week away from the anniversary. And I got triggered and I came home and I started talking to my husband and I was like, I just started breaking down. I knew it was there and I dealt with it. I dealt with it head on. I didn't care if it was rational, irrational. It was how I was feeling. I was in the moment. And I dealt with it, and I really actually had other things to do. So I gave it, I framed it out, I cried, I dealt with it, and I had to go, and I had to move on. I'm not overscheduled. I'm actually happily personally scheduled tonight. I had a couple of things that I had to do after I got home from work. So I have kind of emerged on the other side to be able to deal with things because now I can speak to the stories, and I know, okay, I'm totally triggered right now. What is that? Instead of kind of running away from it and trying to kind of self-soothe, I'm actually acknowledging it, honoring it, and just saying, yeah, it might be the stupidest thing. It was 17 years ago, but yeah, it was a traumatizing experience. And it doesn't have to ruin my night. I can frame it out. I can give it space. I can honor it. I don't need to memorialize what happened, like on the date, it was a week ago. I don't need to memorialize that anymore. But if I need a moment and it just happens, frame it out and kind of move forward. And that was just today.
Well, what I love that you said is that it's often, and this was, what Tina was reflecting as well, it's like a death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? It's not necessarily always that one trigger. It's the accumulation of stress. As you said, it's the domino. It's these subtle things. And then you brought up this really, I think this is the crux of all food challenges and self-soothing challenges, is we have to learn to be with it. And the story, story is used a lot these days, but all of our stories were true at one time. So it's not like we were making it up at one time, but part of that BOGO that Tina was referencing and what you're talking about, being able to frame it out, is like, okay, I can separate that this is happening, that what I'm feeling is residue from the past, but what's happening in the now is not necessarily the same thing. And so being able to frame what you're saying, frame it out, is like, okay, this is what I'm feeling. I can be in it. That takes a lot of work though. And it takes resilience, what you're talking about. And I think it takes being able to see that we don't always have to be reacting to things, and to develop that space takes resilience, is what I'm trying to say. Like, because when we don't have it, we're just triggered all the time. So thanks for bringing that up, because that's the second point of a big question that I get is, why do I self-sabotage? And my view on it is that it's actually self-protection, that both what Tina and Lourdes were explaining is your nervous system is jacked up, whether it's from presenting, and that's helping you, right? Like, you want to have some adrenaline when you're going into presenting. Like, you want to, if you're triggered by something, you want to know, is this safe or not? Right? It's not like everything is puppies and rainbows. We need discernment.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge is when our nervous system kind of overcorrects, and in eating is just such a way to soothe that, right? I mean, food companies spend hundreds of millions of dollars to not only are we soothed from that discomfort, from that residue of the past, but also our brain lights up with the reward center. So we really get rewarded for bypassing the discomfort or being in it, as what you said, Lourdes, which is, I love it. It's not saying everything's love and light. It's saying I might have to move through some stuff to get there, but that's a really important piece of that. So I'd love we'll just go back and forth. Tina, what did you find that you were on guard about, or that surprised you in terms of your nervous system being reacted maybe more than you suspected, because maybe you had even normalized it, like your travel?
Yeah. And that whole piece of it, the nervous system and the adrenaline and the letdown and the eating to soothe piece, which taps into, part of the journey we went through was kind of looking back on our, like you said, our old stories. And my old story is, oh my goodness, if you needed to soothe a heartache, celebrate a report card, you can put anything in front of that. Right? So, and there's happy memories around that too. It wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It was insert whatever, and we rewarded it with food, or we got through it with food, or we soothed with food. So there was that. And one of the exercises that we did in the program was kind of identifying that inner protector. And it sounds super cheesy, but my inner protector is my old dog, Lucy, who was just like the truest protector. And so when I picture her, it's like picturing a family member that loves me, that's saying, God, that was really a lot of energy. You worked really hard at that. You did a great job here. Let's go eat and celebrate. So it was breaking through that old story. And especially, it's anywhere, but especially in an airport, just all signs pointed eat all the time. And traveling, everything is a reward. If you get bumped up to first class, you are rewarded with food. If you get an upgrade at your hotel, you are rewarded with food. Like, everything is food all the time, which is like that constant, here, you deserve this. This is hard, or you've earned this in some way. So it's just a big shift and kind of surprise, and getting to that other side and kind of sitting with it was recognizing that, first of all, and then figuring out that is not the only way to calm my nervous system down. In the past, that was the only way I knew. So it was learning, like, is there another way to do this? And of course there is. Society wants us to do one thing, right? There's, like you said, tons of money put into going through, and alcohol was an issue as well. Like I would, when I got done training, go to the airport because I would have, it was about food and a glass of wine. That was my unwinding. So changing that was just changing that story, which did not happen overnight. That's for sure. It was a work in progress, but I'm on the other side now, which feels amazing.
Yeah, I think you reminded, you point out some really good points about how even companies now, because I was like, oh, as you were talking, I was thinking about, did you have Book It? I know you're a big reader, but when I was in elementary school, there was this program called Book It with Pizza Hut. And my parents got paid every, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Do you remember Book It, Lourdes?
I don't remember, but that sounds amazing.
It was, you would get this pin, and if you read 5 books, Pizza Hut would give you a free mini pizza. And my parents got paid every other Friday. We never went out going out to eat because my parents were teachers. We didn't have a lot of money, but every other Friday was payday. And this is like so funny. I had to be home in time for the Dukes of Hazzard. This is like, talk about it spilling all our secrets. But I'm thinking about, like, you got rewarded for reading. I remember when I was in swimming lessons and I was so afraid to jump off the diving board. And everyone was like trying to coerce me, and I was like shaking, and my dad's like, we'll take you to Dunkin' Donuts. And I just like flew off the board. I was like,
wow.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh my God, you're totally bringing back so many funny memories. But you're right. We get wired that pattern for good and for hard things. And then the whole built environment just keeps reinforcing that today, because again, it's almost like double the reward. Again, that you feel loved by the company or the environment, but then it lights up the brain as well and relaxes you. So,
yeah.
How about you? How about you, Lourdes?
Oh boy, I remember the turning point at which I told my husband, I was just like, don't think I'm like at the bottom of a gallon of ice cream. It wasn't like that. It was like just constantly, if I had high emotions, low emotions, I'd find myself with food, and it was just like, I'm a foodie. I like good quality meals. I like cooking. I like going out to nice restaurants. But then, like, starting to fill in the spaces because I'm having emotions, it just didn't make sense. I wanted to stop that behavior. And I remember I had something on a Saturday, and I'm looking at a cupboard, and we'd already had dinner, and I'm looking at a cupboard that it had spices in it. It didn't even have food. And I'm looking at my husband. He's like, what are you looking for? I'm looking in the spice cabinet because we don't keep snacks in the house. Otherwise I'd have to like go to the local convenience store, Wawa, and like pick up some ice cream or something, or a pint at the supermarket, which isn't that far. And I was like, I don't know. I'm upset about something. I'm anxious, but I couldn't even like figure and formulate what it was. And I basically, after our first session, you asked me all of these questions that just like made my brain explode. I told you, like, after our first session, I think we were a week apart, and I had written out an entire box of index cards. I intended to just have little notes, like, oh, the next time I talk to Allie, I'll have like 5 note cards with like ideas and thoughts, that I may have like explored. I was out like writing front and back on these cards because the questions of like that you were posing, and one of them is, what's your conflict style? I'm an accommodator. And we hadn't even addressed, the inner protector at that point. She's a whole nother character. But I remember going to a dance, and I decided just to chill the F out because I thought people were talking about me because they were looking at me and smiling, and I thought they were laughing. And I was just like, I was going to leave the event or drink myself silly. And I was like, my husband's driving, I can just drink, And I decided to kind of like go, well, let me go think about this. So I go to the ladies' room, really nice place. I get to sit in this little loungy chair. And people are like, hi, how you doing? I'm like, hey, how you doing? Like, I just look like a little bit of a basket case. Like, I don't get hot, but I was just like pretending I was hot or whatever. Or maybe the music was too loud or something. It was really early in the night. So I just have a moment, and I'm thinking those people were probably talking about me in actually a positive way. And these are two people that I know I can trust. I know I can trust these people. I don't have to assign all of these kind of negative emotions to them. I was like, you got to sit with this. Like, this was really, I think we met on like a Tuesday or Wednesday, and this was like a Friday or Saturday. And I was like, right. I was drinking this really horrible drink too, which like I realized that in the moment I'm addressing the emotions and I'm having like this really like alcoholic cocktail that it really wasn't that good. So I was like making all these like connections. This is why I said like my brain exploded. And I was like, oh, this is powerful stuff. So I had a lot to think about from the questions that you posed, which they just hit the point. They hit the mark of what I'm supposed to be thinking about the story. And that is basically think about the story. It's like, stop reacting, give a minute, sit in it, and just kind of address it because there's something going on there. And that was at the end of last night's podcast. I asked you a question and you were like, well, yeah, that's an action, but I want you to think about how it triggers you. And I was like, yes, again, go back to the story. It's like, so that's kind of where I am with things. I've had an amazing 6 months of unquestionable stress, but I've definitely kind of changed to not reacting. Of course, I'm allowed to react, but just change the script.
Well, and what I love that you explain is a lot of people feel anxious, right? They say, I'm anxious. Everybody's anxious today. And what you were explaining is, at least how I'm viewing it is, and for, again, part of this, why we need to self-soothe is because our nervous system is stressed. And then we add more overwhelm. And Lourdes was talking about her style was accommodation. So if we think we have to accommodate, that almost like tips us over the edge. And again, you can learn your style at alishapiro.com. Take the What's My Comfort Eating Style quiz. You can learn yours, to get started. But that adds almost that additional layer of overwhelm because then we feel stuck, right? It's like these people are talking about me. Do I leave or do I drink myself to death? And you figured out maybe choice C or D or E, right? You were able to reduce the overwhelm by realizing what was your version of being on guard about it or versus what was true, and do the mental inquiry to calm yourself down in the moment and then really be able to test that, not just have magical thoughts, which is why you said you've had 6 months of both you and Tina's still traveling, you're still living your life, right? Like
yeah.
We have to learn how to deal with real life, which I love that you shared. And what we were talking about, just so for people on this podcast, it was the webinar that we did on Why Am I Eating This Now about the scale and how that triggers a lot of people. It's not the scale itself, but for a lot of people, it puts them into this competitor mode. Oh my God, I'm winning or losing. Am I ahead or behind? And if you do that first thing in the morning, that's really adding to your stress and overwhelm all day. Even if you think you're trying to ignore it, it almost puts like, when I was struggling with my weight, it almost put like a cloud over the day. Like it didn't matter what else happened. It was like, but I'm behind and I don't trust myself to get ahead.
And it's the first thing you do. It has that power over you.
Yeah. And so this is all about us starting to reduce the overwhelm of the things in our life that stress us out if we really want to get to the root. So in talking about, for Lourdes, recognizing your accommodator style, I always say clarity is a process and a tool here, which I know is kind of meta, but once you can actually see what you're doing, then you can choose differently. And so we talk, and the other huge question I get, and I think is so misunderstood across the hashtag food freedom, I think it's misunderstood, is some people want you to say like, well, is it really worth it? And the reason it is worth it in the moment is it is soothing a lot of discomfort and rewarding you. If you think the best outcome you can get is this temporary reward versus learning to be with these feelings and discovering what you actually need, creates the sense of safety, you develop resilience, and it's just this wonderfully upward spiral so that as things happen, you can, I love how Lourdes was saying, frame them out. You can almost create space to emote, not be afraid of those feelings, and then move on. So you're still honoring them and also not wallowing in them to the point that they do overtake you. So I'd love to hear, and we'll go back to Tina, we'll just continue the order. what worked for you to, reduce this overwhelm and have something? Because I think I know when I was battling food, I'd be like, nothing is more rewarding than those brownies or ice cream. Like, you can't tell me that, right? And I will say too, just from a physiological standpoint, when we have this chronic stress, we literally need more and more pleasure to register any kind of pleasure. So this is kind of the long term, the more resilient you become, the more sensitive you actually become to sugar, to fats, to alcohol, which is a good thing because then you don't need to overdo it as much. But that's just on the physiological level. But there has to be an emotional satiation. I have a podcast and I have like trouble pronouncing things. But so Tina, what did you discover were some of the things that worked for you?
Yeah, well, and it took a long time. Again, none of it was an overnight thing, that is for sure. But through even prior to this program, working with you, Allie, for a long time, my biggest aha was figuring out all these food intolerances and allergies and changing. I mean, my gosh, I totally overhauled everything to the point that I now know. For example, dairy is a big one for me. And I have so many people that are like, I cannot imagine a world without cheese. And good Lord, I mean, I get that. But you get sick for so long. And now I have fine-tuned. I know exactly how food works in my body to the point that one of the big changes is, because my triggers used to be, peanut M&Ms, comfort food, macaroni and cheese, a bagel with cream cheese, all that stuff. And those don't trigger me anymore because I finally am on the other side of realizing it is not worth, not worth it in my body. I just feel terrible. So one of the big things that I do when I know my nervous system's all jacked up and it's I can still technically eat French fries. So that is my new battle. But I really kind of calm myself down and just think about, even if French fries don't make me as sick as the other things, they do not make me feel good. So I've really taken to just pausing at different times during the day and taking a deep breath. I actually set an alarm on my watch. My watch buzzes. I pause and I take a really, really deep breath, 3 if I can. Sometimes I don't even have time to just calm myself down though. And that stops the spiral. It stops all that my mind's going, you deserve these, you can have blah, blah, blah. And if I can calm myself down long enough to kind of go through how do I want to, one of the exercises, I don't remember what week it was, how do I want this to end? That's that question of, when I get on this airplane, how do I want to feel? When I arrive at home, how do I want to feel? Like, how do I want this trip to end? And that can kind of calm me down and remove the French fries. But I will tell you what, every once in a while, I do want those damn fries and I eat them, but I eat them with no guilt. Like, they're worth it. Like, it's just not all the time. And when I have them, when there's not the guilt, when I just want to have them and then let that guilt go, what's crazy is it doesn't affect my body as badly as when I eat them. I know I didn't want them. I don't know if that even makes sense, but my body absolutely is in tune and reacts to all of that. So it's been this huge learning along the way and a lot of kind of setting myself up for success. I pack a ton of food with me. TSA is not making that any easier. Oh my God. But that's a whole other Oprah. But I have my lunch bag and I take my own. I have some protein shakes that really work for me. I always have some RX bars, apples. So I have things that I have on hand. And now, I don't typically go out to restaurants. I go to grocery stores. And I found the beauty in that. Like, going to these small towns and visiting their local grocery store is amazing. And as a writer, I just write down all this oh God, it's just, there's crazy stories there. So I think of it as an adventure and something to look forward to. So I've just totally changed how I travel. And I am a planner and a type A person. So I know if I'm having that battle with my nervous system, if I have stuff on hand, if I have an apple, if I have an RX bar, if I have something on hand, it just is one less mental hurdle of, I don't have anything, and look, there's the only thing, I tell myself those stories that there's only crap at the airport. Actually, there's not. Every airport you can usually find a hard-boiled egg or something, but if I have stuff with me, it kind of just removes some of those hurdles. So I don't know if that answered your question. I apologize.
No, it totally does. So what you're explaining is like the surface of the mental patterns that changed. So what I would ask is, especially around the traveling, what conflict style, competitor, avoider, or accommodator helped you change when you started to realize that's what you were doing about this is so hard. It's only me. How did learning that help with all of a sudden, again, you're still going to small towns. You're still trying. Right. How did that change what I think people would think of as motivation, but I think of it more as our internal state?
Yeah. And that quiz, it was mainly competitor. I can be an accommodator when I'm at home, usually in different situations, but the traveling is the competitor. And oh my gosh, because some of the questions that you ask, I mean, I did the poor me. I mean, this is so hard for me, and there's nothing that I can eat in this town. I couldn't live in this town, everything. Poor me, poor me, poor me. No one else has to deal with all of this. So first of all, that recognition of me just kind of pitting myself against the world, like that is just ridiculous. So kind of recognizing me versus them, and me fighting myself and comparing myself to everyone. Like it was just an aha of recognizing what I'm doing and then going back and saying, okay, that whole piece of this is that story idea. This is the story I'm telling myself. I have no idea that this is true. And like, what other evidence is there? Could I find some other pieces? So that's been really helpful. Yeah, that it was, I didn't ever think of myself as a competitor, but when I did the quiz, oh my God, it's loud and clear.
I am and I think it's important, and we talk about this in the program, which makes this complex, is there's a lot of advantages to being a competitor, an avoider, and accommodator. This is not all bad. Like, it's paid off, right? I mean,
right.
And I'm a competitor too, so don't worry. I mean, a lot of us are. But I think also what you're explaining on a deeper level, and this is to me so much what food and our health about, is like, okay, if I'm comparing myself, which is making me feel put upon, but if it's actually my choice, because it just feels very different. If I'm choosing this versus it's being thrust upon me, that changes everything. So we have to come to these conclusions ourselves. Absolutely.
And your language, that was something to add to this. Your language of, eating in alignment with my health goals. Like, I have adopted that. That just feels so different rather than I can't eat this. Like, that just feels the punishing. That's the competitor like coming out, and that just setting up this like angry tension where now when I make choices, just, is this in alignment with my health goals? Is this going to help me feel the way I want to feel? Which has also led to I work with schools and hosts that are so gracious and again, want to reward me with food and give me lunch. And it is all from a place, this is where the accommodator comes in. So I never want to make anyone feel bad. So it's a lot of times I would like try to make it work, or I just kind of move the food around, but then I wasn't eating lunch and I'm going for these 8 hours a day. And now I just stand up for myself of coming from a place of love of, thank you so much. I brought my own lunch. I'm all good. And you know what? It's not offending. No one cares. Like, I don't have to over explain myself. If they ask a little bit more, I just have food allergies, period. Like, that's it. So yeah.
Well, and I love that you brought up about the French fries and the words eating in alignment, because when you start to know your body, you know what you can get away with. Like, you were talking about dairy. I should stay away from dairy, but like Carlos and I, it was the longest day of the year today, and we had coffee to doggy daycare. So we're like, let's go out to lunch. And I felt like some cheese on my, my enchilada. And I was like, okay, normally I don't do this, but I've been, I guess they would say clean enough, but I've been eating in alignment enough that I know I can get away with this. And I'm going to do it because I want it. But I know my tipping point and when to pull back or whatnot. And I think that's so important of like, perfection doesn't exist, and you don't need to be perfect to get results and feel really amazing.
Right.
So you're kind of missing out on those.
Yeah, I don't want to give up French fries forever. It's one of the few things I can eat.
Yeah. I still eat French fries on occasion too. So I totally get it. And then when you want to do it, you can actually enjoy it. And I totally agree with you that it's like the stress of like, I shouldn't do this, it almost like makes it harder to digest or something. I mean, we know you go into fight or flight, which impairs digestion, but it's a very subtle thing. So I love that you brought that up, that it's about alignment. When we're asking, why am I eating this now? Sometimes it's because I fucking want to.
Exactly. And I'm going to.
Yes, and I'm going to enjoy it. What about you, Lourdes? What has worked for you? And I love that we're doing this like, the program ended like in November. We're doing this like 8-9 months later. And so again, we talk about this taking time. However, I would say this is still the quicker fix because quick fixes don't actually work. It's a longer, quicker fix. That's super meta. But the fact that you guys are still having insights and still with the process and still feel like you're improving is awesome. But Lourdes, for you, what did you find was super helpful?
This is where the good girl comes in. And she's accommodating, but she's also going to do the right thing. But I get a lot of people because I dealt with my food issues outside of the program. So I've been dealing with them for like 15 years, discovering a wheat allergy, discovering what kinds of soy I can eat. Not that I'm going to overdo soy, but which specific kind. So I've worked like for the last 15 years on like being in tune with my food and eating and seeing what triggered things. Like for my whole life, I thought my bad skin and my itchy face were stress. I discovered that it was wheat after I did a cleanse, a detox. And I was like, are you kidding me? I can breathe. My face doesn't itch and I'm like less broken out. This is crazy. Like, why did nobody tell me this? And I appreciate that you address that in a lot of your programs. I couldn't imagine coming into one of your programs and having to do the food and do the emotions at the same time. I would have been like a basket case. And that's the thing. It's a quick fix. Like I had a lot of ways in which I stopped the behavior, but I also know that I've been working with you for 3 years. So there are these gaps. So it's like, it's like you throw the pebble and then it like resonates. And then it's just like, oh, okay. And then you throw the pebble again and you get that sort of echo effect. So that's kind of what the work with you has been like. I just remember, it kind of echoes. So today was cake day. And a lot of people know that I take care of myself and I do an ultra endurance events. I've done 3 half Ironmans at this point and one not so successfully. 2 I finished. One is on paper it's a DNF, but I actually finished, made all the cutoffs, and the first one was successful. It was a little shocking. And part of how I got there was with how I treated my eating, but I kind of now with basically what happens to a lot of people when they start doing endurance exercise is they gain weight because there's a lot at stake. You put a lot of pressure on yourself. So it's this other world and people start overcompensating with food and it becomes this whole other creature. And a lot of people know and they sort of see me and they kind of watch me and they say, what's your next race? And this and the other thing. But then there's cake day. And I tell people how bad sugar is for you. So people like watch me on cake day. So like sometimes I'm like, I originally, when I came to this office, we just celebrate all the birthdays on one day. It's the third Thursday of every month. And, like the first couple times I was a little surreptitious and I'm like, I feel like I'm being a hypocrite. This is like not cool. And I was like, you know what? Actually, you can have something every once in a while. It's that persistent, chronic, you're going to do this, you're going to eat cake for breakfast. You're going to eat cake for lunch. You're going to eat cake for, dinner. That's when it's a problem, but if you're celebrating everybody's birthday, it's okay. And I kind of like need to send that message because it is okay. I can't actually eat the cake part. I only have the icing. So which is really funny.
Icing. That's how I do it too.
It's really funny. Yeah. So it's like I basically get icing and people are just like, is that okay? Because people are starting to call me their coach. And I'm like, it's cake day. We're celebrating everybody's birthday. We're not doing this every day. We're not doing this every weekend. It's cake day. It's okay. And they're like, okay. So I feel like I'm a little bit of a role model. I pass a candy dish every day at work and I watch it come down and I don't touch it. Except maybe that one, as if there's something left in the dish when I'm leaving on a Friday, I'm going to have it. But again, it's like, if there's something, it's a Friday and I'm out the door and it's the last piece. It's moments like those that you kind of have to honor the fact that it's okay to do these things. It's okay to have like fries, maybe not every night, but like when you're having like, a good burger, So I have also reduced the anxiety and when people are watching me eat. Because most of the time I am eating really well. I am eating in alignment with my values. So I can relax a little bit. I can go out to eat. I sometimes will order fish. Sometimes it's a burger. Sometimes it's a side salad. Sometimes it's fries. It's never consistent. It's never, oh, I'm going to a restaurant. I'm going to eat the worst thing on the menu. Like, what is it? I think Olive Garden. It's the fettuccine Alfredo or something like that. I once split it with somebody with like the endless basket of breadsticks. And I looked it up when I came home and I was like, oh my God, what was that? I've never done it again. It was just, I realized that is not how I want to be eating just because I was, it was fun. It was everything, but that is not entertainment. And I realize that I like my food and I want it to be nourishing. It doesn't have to be the biggest thing for me to enjoy it. And I actually take my time. And when I'm upset, food tastes different. And I realize that that's something that's really powerful, that I always eat slowly, but how it tastes. Because then I have to realize I can calm myself down while I'm eating and the food will taste different by the end of the meal. So it's really just stop thinking about the food as something you just put in to kind of like soothe and self-satisfy and medicate. Like, it's how you say it, like this alignment with your values, which is something that I never even thought about. So celebrating Cake Day kind of with freedom, it's very liberating. It's very liberating.
So it sounds like learning how to break out of that accommodator pattern has enabled you to like really tap into what you want versus thinking like, am I going to be a hypocrite or I shouldn't be eating this? And as you're training for these intense races, that's like totally out of my wheelhouse because I'm like into bar right now because I'm like, oh my God, I don't get too out of breath. And it's hard enough for me. But again, recognizing that you're doing it on your own terms and kind of how Tina said, how do I want this to end? You're applying that to your racing. Like, okay, this is about certain values for me. And that takes the anxiety and the pressure off. Another thing I'm curious, because when you were in the program, you were renovating, you had like a lot of stuff go off track. And was that and I think that's important for people to realize because that stuff affects our eating as well when we think we deserve that. So I remember just in the program, you're being like, oh my God, by keeping this kind of story, we call it keeping the story loop opening, continuing to get clear on what's actually happening versus our idea of what's happening. Do you think that affected you in terms of now, of course, your resilience now, but in those moments of, okay, now I only eat on the Friday if there's anything left versus at the work dish versus have to have that or whatnot. Can you explain that connection? It's more holistic.
Yes.
But those.
You appear magically at the right times. And the support that I got with the program was, I was able to get the story out, look at it on a screen. There were a couple of times where I wrote down some notes and just look at it objectively. What is going on? Whose story is this? What am I doing? Well, whose life am I living? And then I was like, wait, I've wanted this renovation for 10 years. I absolutely love all the choices. Just because X, Y, and Z didn't happen doesn't mean it's still not worth it and enriching. And that was actually something that when I was doing my master's program that I guess I kind of got lost. I didn't enjoy getting my master's because it was so much about just doing the schoolwork rather than enjoying the process and what I was learning. So it was very different. There was a level that I really associated that I was enriching my life with this renovation that I realized, and I was like, it's just a renovation. Like, yeah, that'll cost you is something that you're going to hear. And you just have to accept that and move on and figure things out. And I knew it wasn't going to go smoothly. People kept telling me in the program, and I was like, all right, you've got to accept this. Even though you mapped this out and you thought it was going to go a certain way, it's not going to be perfect. And that's all right because it's your renovation and you can handle this. And then other things happened with the family and other stories and just like things kind of snowballed. But then I realized I'm talking to these people. I'm getting answers about my past. You are bringing this up. You are ready for it. and I had to help a friend out, and it was like the same thing. It's like they have helped out a ton of people, never asking for anything in return. It's okay for you to like put yourself out a little bit for this person, and it's okay. It was just like one of those things, like creating a positive feedback loop out of stuff that's happening that you have no control over, but you then have to find the humor in it. And how you deal with it can help somebody else.
Totally. And what I love that you're describing with the renovation and family stuff, especially breaking that accommodator pattern, right? It's like, oh my God, I forget that I need to get something out of this, even if things are going off the rails. And we start to realize if we get some sort of value from it, we can handle the inevitable imperfection or the things that come up. But it's when we're constantly feeling like we're losing and the unfolding is winning, right? Because the accommodator mindset tends to be win-lose or either or. If we can ground into, okay, what's important, and this isn't about me, and I can break this pattern, it ripples out into other areas because we're the common denominator. We're the one bringing ourselves to this. So thank you for sharing that. I want people really to understand that these patterns play out in food, and they're also playing out in other areas of our life, which is what is snowballing. And then often that emotional stuff is often why we eat at night or on Fridays or the weekends or on vacation. It's kind of like, okay, we've held in this tension. Some days we can hold it in only till the evening. Some days we can hold it off till Saturday. And then times in our lives, we hold it off until vacation. But if we can prevent that in that pattern, it's just like food, I think, goes to the rightful place in our lives. And I have to laugh how you're like, you pop up at the right times. Because just so everyone knows, we haven't been working consistently for 3 years. Just you've kind of come in and out of workshops and then the Why Am I Eating This Now program, which was super fun. So I'm not a bobblehead, just kind of floating. I pictured myself like, hey.
No, that's why I tried to give the analogy of like the ripple. Like you're like the pebble that drops and then it has this ripple effect. And then we have another encounter, a significant encounter, and then it's like this ripple effect. And it's very kind of organic and it just sort of happens. I like how you said the unfolding of events. And I think I like the sound of that word, like the unfolding. You need to observe.
Yeah, and take in what's happening and again, have discernment. I was reading some quotes and the Emily Dickinson one came up. Tina's a huge reader. Maybe you know the whole quote, but she talks about like the soul should always remain ajar. And I like the word ajar for discernment because I feel like it's a better metaphor of like, as things are unfolding, we can't just assume that everything's going to be perfect. It's like, let me stay open. I'm still going to stay rooted in what I know because I know things, right? I know how certain people are. I know how certain situations are. Yet I'm going to stay open to challenge if maybe things really are what I think they are. So I love that. And if we can stay ajar as the unfolding, keep our soul ajar, we become more resilient, more agile, and we get more of what we need. And I think we also discover more of what we need and want. I think sometimes we're surprised at, kind of how Tina was saying, like, I just needed someone to decompress with, but not telling me, oh, it's great. It was like, I just need to like discharge because this is intense, and same with you, Lourdes, like going to the bathroom and be like, wait, these people, I know them, whatever. It's like kind of like mentally discharging some of that nervous system buildup. So thank you guys so much. I really wanted people to get a real life examples of people who have like really gone through this process and can connect it not just to food, although we play these patterns out with food. So before we go though, is there anything I'd love to hear from both of you that you think is important for people to know just about food or whatever? And I have the program, Why Am I Eating This Now? It's available. Are there things that people should know before embarking on? Because I like Lourdes, how in the email when I asked you, I was like, hey, would you be willing to come on this podcast? You're like, I don't know if people know how much work it is to really take responsibility for yourself. And I was like, I want you to talk about that because we're real here. So, but also how sometimes are better than others. And so I was just wondering if you guys have any closing thoughts or thoughts on that based on your experience. And Tina, we'll take it back to you.
Yeah. Oh, I would agree with Lourdes for sure. And it's like anything. I think people probably already know this, but it's worth hearing again of it's deeper than you get in it, what you put out. No, you get out, you get out what you put in, right? I'm trying to say that simple and then I can't say it, but yes, that whole idea, it takes a lot of work. And it's not the easy quick fix. And my goodness, same way I met you, Allie, years ago, and we've kind of gone up and down. And every time I learn a little bit more and come back and have a few more questions and go down this road, but 100% life changing. And I have these tools, and every time a new situation comes up, I use the same tools, just like figuring out a different way to use them or a different twist on them. Like even figuring out that I'm a competitor and figuring out that I didn't even realize it explains a whole lot of my type A personality, and got a whole lot of degrees under my belt because I feel like I'm falling behind if I'm resting. So just all of these ahas. So it is a lot of work. It's really worthwhile work. And it's not the quick fix. It's not like following the Whole30 and, at the end it's kind of done. It's the mental work and using the tools in just a variety of situations that I feel like it just goes on and on and on. And that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. So it's the long road, which it's just incredible. I just think it's worth it. I feel you always say this, Allie, and I think it's so true. People will know when they're ready for it because they're just done with everything else.
Yes.
And when you hit that point, it's like, you're ready to do this work now.
Yes.
I feel like that's the signal. Okay, it's not really about calories. It's not really about going to the gym. There's a lot else going on here. And so when you've hit that point and recognize it, then that's when you dig in and do the work.
Yeah. And I love that you talk about those tools being applicable, because I'm actually starting membership community, an insatiable community for anyone who's taken any of my programs, so we can have more ongoing support. And, everyone's like, you need to call it Truce with Life, because once you get done with the food stuff,
yes,
you don't need it for food anymore, because then you have to deal with your emotions, right?
Right.
We're in Truce with Food right now, where so many people are like, okay, the food thing's done. Now my job, I'm realizing, isn't fulfilling, or now this. And I'm like, awesome. I'm like, all you do is use the same tools.
Yep.
But I think that's an important point of, again, and I've talked about this on the podcast, but being healthy is having that vital energy pulsing through you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think if and there is time, I love that we're kind of coming full circle. We have seasons where we need to rest or whatnot, but even in resting, things are happening. And I think that's so important for us to realize, being healthy is honoring that creative tension in our life. We are designed to grow, because you're either growing or you're stagnant. In Chinese medicine, if you have a deficiency or you're stagnant, that's disease as well. And so I think oftentimes we feel stagnant with the same diet loops over and over again. But you're right. When you're tired of that stuff, there's a new opening. And I love that you bring up the competitor, because as someone who's healing her own competitor pattern, it really is a process to figure out, what do I value and how do I self-actualize versus what kind of culture has told me? Because the healthier we get, the more we're like, oh my God, I've been digesting a bunch of bullshit. Right? I got to heal
Especially now.
Yes. Oh my God. Is it all coming up so that we can see? It's like our food allergy test. Oh my God, everything is irritating. So thanks for putting that into those words. And Lourdes, any words from you?
It's that stereotypical, the journey, basically it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It is not a perfect pattern. There are days that you're going to feel, I have this, I've mastered this. And other days you're going to be like, I'm going to Starbucks for the worst thing in the menu. It's okay. It's okay to have these moments as you're starting out. And you realize that you do have to do the work. So you may have to carry a journal with you and kind of figure out what just happened. I just came out of this meeting and it was my meeting, and how did it get derailed? And sometimes it didn't actually get derailed. You just have that perception because the outcome wasn't what you expected. And you said this, Tina, because that was part of one of the things we learned. How do you want this to end? So not in an unflexible way, but a vision. Mm-hmm. So what kind of work do you want to do today? Maybe just this week. You've got 3 days of chaos next week. What do you want them to look like? Oh, you just discovered your cousin's in the hospital. How are you going to make this work because she's your favorite cousin? It's one of those things, take a step back and assess the situation. And you are allowed to have emotions and, embrace them, honor them. Don't just go running to your standard script, whatever that looks like. Figure out how you want to change that.
I love that. And does it take, any words of advice on that? You said, I think it takes a lot more work than people. Do you still stand by that? Let me ask that.
I do. I'm a writer. I have written pages and pages. And in the program we did, the Tapa style, I didn't want to write too much because I didn't want people to read too much and think that I was attention seeking. But at the same time, I just thought it was important to kind of share my aha moments. So it was just, it was kind of finding the balance, trying to get some feedback, not be too needy. So there were things that I just plain old journaled out. But I like doing that. I've actually referred someone to you who said that's too much work.
And well, better they know now.
Yeah. And I was like, she went a different route. And for her, I'm hoping that it works and it's permanent. And I think she's okay for now. If she ends up having a problem maybe a year from now where things have changed, I'm going to say, well, I can help walk you through this program and make it seem less overwhelming. And that was even in the program itself. And you can actually speak to this. We had the procrastinators.
The avoider pattern.
The avoiders who they were in the background. You knew they were there. They were listening. They were engaged. And they just kind of couldn't commit till about week 3. And I'm the accommodator. I have to do my exercises. I have to be ready. I have to be the good girl. It's still there and it works for me because it gives me a certain level of comfort. But, it's like that's the thing about this program, that you will help guide people through whatever their thing is. And yeah, it works.
Yeah. And we're all on our own timeline. And that's why I like that the tools are timeless, because just the more you use them and the more, whenever you get to them, the better they get. And I think it's important to realize too, and again, your friend who is saying this is too much work, we all have to find our own path. This is not the right path for everyone. However, there's no shortcuts in life. Like you're going to have to put the time in, and sooner or later to address the emotional stuff. And it's relieving. Like there's never a day that I regret spending the time on doing that. And I personally found it relieving to see like, oh my God, these patterns, this explains so much and there's more freedom. And so if you value freedom, you put the work up front or you put the work on the back end. And I don't know, that's kind of a truth that I've always, unless you're super privileged in the 1%, you just pay someone to do all your work. But most of us are not able to do it. But then you never develop any grit or discernment. So there's a cost there. There's always benefits to having constraints. So thank you guys both so much for your time. If this sounds interesting, I really encourage you to take the quiz. There's some even resources. There's a private or a secret insatiable podcast episode that will give you some even more tools. And then if you want support around this, check out Why Am I Eating This Now? But definitely start with the quiz at AliShapiro.com. And thank you both for being brave.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We talk about bravery kind of in this abstract way, but it takes courage to look at our stuff. So thank you guys for leading the way. We can have better stories and more freedom than we've been told. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Health Rebels, for tuning in today. Have a reaction, question, or want the transcript from today's episode? Find me at AliShapiro.com. I'd love if you leave a review on Apple Podcast and tell your friends and family about Insatiable. It helps us grow our community and share a new way of approaching health in our bodies. Thanks for engaging in a different kind of conversation. And remember, always, your body truths are unique, profound, real, and liberating.